everybody. So this is our final exam study guide, if it decides to load. My computer's being very slow this morning when I'm recording this. All right, so in the coming weeks, you have your final exam, and I'm going to go over exactly how that works, the 4 questions which you might see on the final exam, the 2 that you will choose on the day of. You won't know that until the day of the final, so I would recommend going ahead and studying for all 4 just so that you're ready for any that might show up on the exam. And then remember that of those 2 that you see on the day of the final, you only have to choose 1. And we'll go over that again in just a moment. So first of all, important details about when to take the final. You can take the final exam anytime from when I post it, which will be probably later today, up until the due date, which is next week, Wednesday, 12/9. And remember that your exam has to be completed and submitted no later than 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday the 9th. So Wednesday of next week is when this needs to be finished. Once you begin the exam, you'll have 2 hours to take it. So in your case, since the exam is due by 11:59, the latest that you would want to start would be by about 10 o'clock at night on the due date. That way you have the full 2 hours to make sure that you get that in and finished. No late exams will be given for just about any reason because we're so close to the end of the semester and because I have to have everything graded, including all of the research papers and these essay final exams and other essays that I have for other classes. It's really difficult for me to give extensions at this point, so please plan accordingly. Of course, if it's a true emergency that couldn't be avoided, let me know and we will work out those details if we have to. Also, if you have extra time on the final exam because you need accommodations, make sure that you give yourself extra time by starting earlier than the 10 p.m. So for instance, let's say you get time and a half, then you would need to start even earlier, right? So make sure that that is the case. Any questions about these due dates, feel free to send me a text on the Remind app or an email, and I will answer you as soon as possible. Okay, so this is how the exam works. In this lecture, we're going to go over 4 possible exam questions. On the day of the exam, when you take the exam, you will only see 2 of those 4 that we have gone over. So I will cut it in half, right? You'll only see 2 of these 4 on the exam. And then you get to choose. So once you see the 2 that are available, you choose the 1 that you would like to answer, and that is your whole exam, just your answer to that 1 question. So for whichever question you choose to answer, out of the 2 possibilities that I will give you, then you should use 2 pieces of evidence and the quote sandwich method to build nice, fully developed paragraphs, okay? So we're going over 4 total. On the exam, there will only be 2 of those 4 available. And then of those 2 questions that you do see on the day of the exam, you choose the one that you would like to answer. For whichever one you answer, make sure that you use 2 pieces of evidence and show me 2 nice full paragraphs at least. All right, again, any questions? Talk to a tutor, talk to me, talk to people in your groups if you are not sure about how this exam is going to work. So here's your first option. Option number 1 deals with rhetorical analysis. So if this question shows up on the exam and it is one that you would like to write about, then here's what you'll do. You'll use this excerpt, so you'll see this excerpt there, from Vanessa Bryant's speech as your evidence. And in using that evidence, you'll need to identify and explain the significance of 2 examples of effective rhetoric that she uses in this excerpt. So you would need to choose 2 examples of rhetoric that you see in this short passage, and tell me what type of rhetoric you see her using and why it's effective, and build your quote sandwich that way. So that's the first option that may or may not show up on the exam. Option number 2 deals with literary analysis. So for this option, you would be working with the short novel that we read, The Awakening, and you would use 2 quotes from The Awakening, and in this case, you get to choose which quotes you use. So you would need to go ahead and look for a couple of quotes that you would plan on using, and then use those if this option is available on the final exam. So using 2 quotes of your choice, explain how Edna's background and or the culture she finds herself in at Grand Isle may have contributed to her unhappiness and ultimately her demise. Again, for whichever quotes you use, make sure to use the quote sandwich method to introduce, cite, and explain your findings. So remember that if this option is there, you need to look at how those things may have made her unhappy, and may have led to her ultimate sort of fall from grace, right? So we did discuss her background in some of the discussion posts, and we also discussed her culture, and how she had some cultural differences, right? So you could choose to discuss either of those things if you choose to answer this question, if it's an option on the final exam. Option number 3 deals with some current events. So for this one, you're going to be using the TED Talks that we watched about addiction as evidence. And you'll explain how addiction can be seen as a complex issue with multiple causes. You should also discuss some things which arguably cause addiction according to our sources. So if you are going to use this one, or answer this question, if it's available on the final, then TED Talks is where you're going to get your evidence, but you still need to use the quote sandwich method. You still need to use quotes from those TED Talks, and you still need to use 2 pieces of evidence that help you explain how addiction is a complex issue and what types of things cause it according to, the research that we have seen so far. Remember that the TED Talks are available in previous modules, and those are still available to you. So you would just need to go back through the modules and look at those TED Talks to prepare to answer this question. Option number 4 deals with more current events. So in this question, if it's available on the exam and it's the one that you choose, then you would need to use some videos that we watched. So remember that you watched a video, either Breathe Nolan Breathe or Roll Red Roll, and a corresponding article. So if you watched Breathe Nolan Breathe, then you would use the article that was about binge drinking. If you watched Roll Red Roll, then you would use one of the articles about sexual assault. So they need to sort of correspond to each other, okay? So using your video and your article, you would discuss the problem. So you'll either be discussing binge drinking or sexual assault. You'll explain what's going on, why it's an important issue, and what you think we should do to help address the problem. Remember that all of these sources can be found in past week's modules. Remember to use evidence from the video and one of the articles you read about the same issue addressed in the video, if this option is available and if this is the one that you choose. So those are your 4 options. I would definitely recommend studying for all 4, and go ahead and grab, your quotes and that kind of stuff early. This is an open note exam, so I definitely recommend gathering information for all 4 options before the date of the exam, and that way you're ready for whichever option shows up. All right, a quick recap of the quote sandwich method. First, you need to make a claim, then introduce your evidence, including the author's name and the name of the source. Use a signal phrase. Then we include the quote or paraphrase. Make sure to keep it short. Cite an MLA, and then lastly, explain the significance. This is arguably the most important part of the quote sandwich method because this is where I hear from you, right? So I would like for this to be twice as long as the quote itself. So if your quote takes up 2 lines, your explanation of its importance should take up about 4. So here's an example of a quote sandwich. This is for a different story. So this is about a short story, and the prompt for this one asked students to talk about how this character changed throughout the short story. So we'll read the quote sandwich here. Mary Ann changes drastically in Sweetheart of the Song Trebong, going from a sweet, innocent girl with plans to marry her high school boyfriend and settle down to a ruthless killer lost in the jungle. So this topic sentence makes a claim, right? It tells us that she changed drastically. Then we move into the signal phrase. So we have the author and the title, and then we have the verb, right? We're told. So this is all signal phrase. In Tim O'Brien's Sweetheart of the Song Trebong, we're introduced to Mary Ann when we're told, and then we have the quote here. We're told from the 6th grade on, they had known for a fact that someday they would be married, live in a fine gingerbread house, have 3 healthy yellow-haired children, and grow old together. And then we have the MLA citation here. Then all of this down here is the explanation. At this point in the story, Mary Ann's future is decided and normal. She would have been expected to marry her boyfriend, settle down, and raise children. That was her plan. She was perfectly happy to go along with the plan and lead a typical life. However, all of that changed once she went to visit her boyfriend, Mark Fosse, in Vietnam. So if this were an answer to one of the questions on the final exam, then there would be additional paragraphs later on that showed, how she continued to change. But this is a really good example of a quote sandwich because we have all of this information that is necessary, from the claim to the signal phrase to the quote, the MLA citation, and then all of this, which is the student's explanation. And then they would continue to do that in the next paragraph or paragraphs to finish up the exam. I've also given you guys here some resources about the quote sandwich method and timed writing. So I'm going to leave this PowerPoint in the same module as the final exam and whatnot so that you can use it to prepare, so you can go over it without me talking you through it necessarily. And then also you can click on these different resources and check those out as you prepare for the final. As always, if you have any questions or you need help, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to your tutors, and reach out to your group mates.